And welcome to another podcast edition of Rosen Sports Monday on this glorious Victory Monday, as we like to call it. The Vikings last night going to the Big D and beating the Dallas Cowboys, knocking them basically out of the playoffs. The Vikings, of course, had been eliminated already, but nice performance by J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings defense in particular late in that game. And, as I get into our guests today, if you saw the open of the game last night on NBC, they had a quick history of the rivalry between the Vikings and the Dallas Cowboys. They had clips of course, the infamous Herschel Walker trade. They had clips of a game that I was very happy to cover back in 1998, Randy Moss's rookie season, when he torched the Cowboys on that Thanksgiving Day game, which was phenomenal in the rain in Dallas. And then, of course, they had the Brett Favre lopsided playoff win at the Metrodome in 2009 when Favre just ate up the Dallas Cowboys, when Dallas was, a lot of people thought they were going to win that game. But the one that stood out, and the one that many of you were not alive to witness or hear about, but you've probably heard about it since, either from your a relative, your dad, an uncle. And if you want to have someone's blood pressure go up, then they showed it last night. Roger Staubach to Drew Pearson. It's the 50-year anniversary of how the name Hail Mary came into focus. The Vikings were 12-2 that year, arguably had maybe their best team ever. And they were ahead of the Dallas Cowboys late in that game. The clock was ticking. It was about to be expired. The Vikings were about to win the game. Now that would not have put them in the Super Bowl, but it would have put them in the at that time, the NFC Championship game. Staubach just launches one. Drew Pearson's the guy, and he pushes off on Nate Wright. Paul Krause comes over a little late. Touchdown. They win the game, and a whiskey bottle comes flying out of the stands. All hell breaks loose, and the Vikings, with one of the most traumatic losses, if not the most traumatic loss of their long storied history. And we've had a couple since then, of course, in 98 in particular, 2009. But the reason I'm talking about it is because if you are too young, weren't around, whatever, you know about it. That's how the term Hail Mary came into being. And our guest today is a man who not only witnessed it in person, but literally on the field. He was an usher for many, many years. We're going to get into his story. The great Dick Jonckowski is here with us today. Dick, good morning to you. I'm so excited to chat with you, and we've been friends for a long time, and it's great to have this opportunity to kind of break down your life and what it was like that day. So how are you today, my friend?
Hey, Mark, not bad at all. I really appreciate the opportunity, as you might imagine. And you and I have done several things, and of course, we go back to our fathers.
Yes.
My dad owned the mini theaters, and he met Paul Rosen, right?
Joe, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Joe Rosen. I said, that's the first thing. When I met him, and then we talked about it, I said, I know your dad.
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, yeah. And we became instant friends.
Well, that's wonderful. Let's start with that moment because, again, for people who, I turned my TV on. My wife and I were making dinner and putting the game on, and I start cussing right away. As soon as I see Roger Staubach up in the stands, I'm going, this is literally taking salt, rubbing it in the wound again. And they're showing the play. And I'm going, I don't want to see this again because I keep expecting it to have a different ending. That somehow Nate Wright is either going to knock the ball away, the referee's going to do the right thing and throw the flag and call offensive pass interference. As Bud Grant, the late Bud Grant, said, it was a great, being a basketball player, it was a great basketball push-off. But more importantly, you were an usher for, I don't know how, we'll talk about how many years. You were, feet away from that play, and I want to hear your perspective of what happened in that play and the entire game and the atmosphere and what happened afterwards, because you were an absolute close eyewitness to the whole thing, Dick.
Well, I guess you're right about that, and I always hated Drew Pearson. I really did. I just didn't like him at all. I remember one day I hollered at him, you couldn't carry Charlie Taylor's jock.
Whoa, Charlie Taylor was a great wide receiver.
He hated me after that, too. But this was just unbelievable. I saw that opening last night, and there I am pointing. If you're looking again, I'm pointing. It shows me when the camera went by. Yeah, it was amazing. I just had 17 years, by the way, I worked as an usher.
Wow.
Head-to-head usher on the field. And my job really was supposed to be to check tickets of everybody or passes to make sure they should be there. But I took it a little further one day in 1962. Actually, it was an exhibition game against the Philadelphia Eagles, and that was my first year on the sidelines, first game really on the sidelines. So Tommy McDonald caught a pass, came out of bounds, and flipped me the ball, and I caught it, just threw it behind my back to Jim Tunney, who was the referee that day.
I remember Jim Tunney.
And the fans yelled. They cheered like fools. And just amazing. So I just kept on doing it. And then, of course, the way it turned out, the Sims were smart. Bob and Gloria put my name on my back and Sims Ushering Service. They got as much publicity as I did. It was really a heck of a deal. And great people to work for, too.
Well, you became quite the attraction yourself then, because you had all these little tricks you would do on the sidelines, and people would yell at you and want to get your response, and you played to the crowd, not shockingly. You had a lot of fun with that, right? I mean, it was wonderful. But getting back to that play, were you down near, where were you standing when Staubach threw that pass to Drew Pearson?
I was on about the 10-yard line.
The Vikings 10-yard line.
Yeah, the Vikings 10 on the side. But, I mean, you can see, I'm the only one there because in those days, remember the teams were the only, one of the few stadiums, Milwaukee, I think, too. Each side had their own one team on one side, one team on the other. They weren't together like they are now.
Well, the old baseball stadium, there was no room for a team on the other sideline. So you had the sideline to yourself. What do you remember about exactly what you saw and what happened on that play?
Well, it was going pretty well, but my ambition always was to be where I think the ball's going to be because, like my wife said, he loves sports. Every place there's a camera, you'll see my husband. And that's kind of true, really, because I did look for a chance to get on TV. But the pass prior to that is when I got in all that trouble.
Now, tell us about that.
Well, it was 4th and 17, and they had to get 17 yards. And Staubach threw a pass maybe 18, 19 yards and to Drew Pearson, but he came down out of bounds. Jack Whitaker from CBS said, Dick, he's out of bounds. Mm-hmm. They're not going to call it. So I really was frustrated. And I just looked down, walked over, and kicked the bottom of his shoe is what I did.
Drew Pearson's shoe?
Yeah. He didn't even feel it because I found out later he didn't even know I did it.
Wow.
But he looked at the films and they saw it. Tom Landry's wife saw it from the stands, called Pete Rozelle, the commissioner. She said, take a look. One of their guards, as she called me, kicked Drew Pearson on that pass. Right. So sure enough, he looks at the videotape, shows me kicking. Everybody in the world, I think, saw it. My dad saw it and he said, uh-oh, my son's in trouble. Yeah. First thing he said. So it was really an unbelievable thing. And I don't think I would ever do it again. And I told somebody the other day, if I did it today, I'd be in jail for assault. You know, the way the world is, I probably would be. Did
you get reprimanded by Pete Rozelle or anything, the commissioner?
Sims took care of that. He told Sims, we got to do something. Then what happened to me, Mark, actually, is I was suspended for being on the field and catching field goals and passes thrown out of bounds for 2 years. I could usher, I could be in the dugout, but I did sneak out twice to catch field goals that they don't remember.
Yeah, I remember what happened, because they didn't have the netting back up there for a long time. So, Fred Cox or someone would kick an extra point. I told this story, and some kid would catch it in the stands, and maybe they'd want to throw the ball back. You couldn't keep it, but the kid would take the ball and run out of the stadium because the ball was probably worth more than the ticket. But getting back to the Pearson play, I'm closing my eyes, and again, like I said, like many others last night, watched it. Even those who weren't born in time to watch it, but they've heard about it. What was your vantage point of it? Because I've talked to Paul Krause about it. I don't want to get him going on it because it gets his blood pressure going, even to this day. Pearson pushed off. I mean, it was clearly a push off, but they weren't going to call it, I guess.
NFL Films did a deal 3 years ago where they decided that when he went into the Hall of Fame, he talked about me. He didn't know who I was. He said that guard or that usher kicked me. They thought it was a good story. They checked up on me and found out I was a Gopher announcer. I did a lot of emceeing and a ring announcer for Vern Gagne, all that stuff. She said, I think you'd be a good story. We're going to come out with our cameras, and we're going to fly Drew Pearson in from Dallas.
Oh, my.
That's 3 years ago now. Yeah. They spent 8 hours at our house with the filming, and Drew Pearson was there for 2.5 hours.
And now he's a nice guy.
Oh, we became friends.
Right
away. Of
course.
The way it turned off. He said, why did you kick me in the ribs? I said, I didn't kick you in the ribs. I said, I never did that at all. But yeah, he was he was fine. In fact, I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's on YouTube, a nice 10-minute thing on what we did. You should see it. You'd enjoy it.
Wow. Well, what I do recall afterwards as well, and everyone talks about it, was a fan in the right field, the right field stands basically from baseball, hurled a whiskey bottle and hit the referee. We always remember his name, Armin Terzian.
That's right.
Terzian.
And I hated the guy, I have to be honest.
Really? Was he? Oh, he's just a bad official.
Yeah,
he's the one that didn't make the call.
Yeah,
he's
very
the
poor.
back judge, whatever he is.
I remember him for many years on that, and I never liked him, but once he got hit and was bleeding so hard, I was only two yards away from him.
Oh, man.
The whiskey bottle hit him. It could have hit me just as well. Some guy said I should have been in court. I said, maybe. But he really bled for a long time. And so I was very careful.
Sure.
Because, I didn't want anybody to think that I was happy about it.
Yeah.
But but there were several bottles really that came out of the stands. They don't talk about that. None of the others hit anybody.
Right.
And one guy threw an orange. Well, all that stuff was coming down.
Man, even the fans knew they weren't mad at the Vikings. They were mad at the official for not obviously making the call, which would have sent Vikings likely to the Super Bowl that year. Not from that game, but the game afterwards.
Oh, that's very true. But you're right. Nate Wright, Paul Krause, Brown was on defensive, and Jeff Wright, but Jeff Wright wasn't close to that at the time. It's amazing though how that happened. They needed 17 yards, and I think they got 18 or 19, and then he comes down.
I forgot about the fourth down play.
Yeah, it came down out of bounds.
Yeah.
And that's where I got all kinds of trouble.
Right.
But, when he came over, we talked about a lot of things, especially that. I told him, you remember we used to yell at each other? He said, I sure do. And he said, I didn't like you any more than you liked me. And that's we really didn't get along.
Did he admit to you or anyone else that I did push off?
No.
Never has he?
I asked him 4 or 5 times while we were doing the interview at my house. Oh, you think I pushed off? No, I'd never do that. Yeah, why go better?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was subtle. Nate Wright went flying in the air. Again, I saw it last night, and it's amazing how it elicits that sort of that immediate reaction from longtime Viking fans, because we've as a Viking entity have been burned before, whether it's Gary Anderson, it's the Favre interception, even in 2009, and Blair Walsh missing we've been cursed in a lot of different ways, but that one has stood the test of time. And it's astonishing that, again, last night on national television, here we are 50 bleeping years later, and they're still showing it.
That's
I
right.
mean, it feels like you're watching something from the Stone Age almost. And every single time, Staubach goes back to pass. And remember, I've talked to Mark Mullaney, who was a defensive tackle for the Vikings, a good one. And I watched that video from behind the line, and he gets completely yanked down on it. Some guy, the offensive lineman for Dallas, takes both hands and literally pulls his jersey down. But they weren't going to call holding on that play. There's no way in hell they're going to call holding. So they were going to let the play go. But, then again, I think in retrospect, you look at it, the Vikings put themselves in a position where a one play could beat them. And you can never do that, especially you're playing at home. And that's unfortunately what happened. Dallas was a good team. They went to the Super Bowl that year.
No, they were very good. That's true. But, it's funny. Even when they came into the league in 1960, and then we came in 61, I never have liked Dallas. I don't know what it was, but the only guy I ever liked was Eddie LeBaron, and he didn't play more than 2 years for Dallas. It just was one of those things where kind of hatred. Roger Staubach, actually, after that game, he saw me because I was going to the Twins room, and he was coming out of the locker room, and he recognized me right away with the Usher's uniform on.
Nice man.
He says, why don't you make up with Drew Pearson? He's going to retire soon. I don't think you guys should hate each other any longer.
Really?
And so the following 2 years, whenever he came back, we actually kind of at least talked for a minute and a half. But we didn't know each other at all, not like it turned out.
Well, I remember Drew Pearson came to town the following year, and I interviewed him at what was then the Radisson South. He was here for some event, and I was going, "Oh my! I'm interviewing Drew Pearson. This isn't going to go well." It gets your dander up, as they say. But he was very pleasant to talk to, and he played it up. He knew exactly what was going on and what buttons to push.
He had me on. He does a podcast like this. He had me on his show in Dallas. He called me, and we actually did it. Yeah. And he was great, and it turned out really well. But I've called him 4 or 5 times since, and he never answered. So maybe he didn't like what I said.
Well, how did you, now we can back it up a little bit. Again, we're talking to Dick Jonckowski. He's got a million stories. We'll get into some of that as well, and a lot of different jobs over the years. But was the ushering job was obviously just a part-time thing. How did you kind of get into all of that? And what year was it?
Well, the Twins came in 61, so did the Vikings.
Right.
And I graduated high school from New Prague in 61. And there was some kind of a thing in the newspaper that said, looking for ushers at Met Stadium. And so my dad, they had a deal. My dad drove me to Bloomington, and then I met Bob Sims. He said, where do you live? I said, New Prague. God, he said, that's what, 40 miles?
Right.
I said, probably. He said, how could you ever work? How are you going to get back and forth? You don't drive, do you? I said, no, but if I had to, I'd hitchhike just to be here. What he didn't know is I just wanted to see the game. Right. I could care less about anything else.
They weren't really probably paying you much, right? I mean, how much did they pay you?
You wouldn't believe it, like $5 a night.
Was it really?
Oh, it was terrible. Honest to God. It's a lot better now. The ushers, it's all a different deal, though. Yeah, $5, maybe, but I was so happy just to see the games. I got in trouble. Bob Sims should have fired me. I left the gate. They had me do a gate one game, and I actually left the gate unguarded. Oh, my gosh. I don't know how many people got in free.
Yeah.
But there were several.
So I'm still trying. You started it out by talking. How did you end up on the field? I mean, because you were the only one, basically, right? Or you a couple other? Well, you would have security people down there.
Yeah, we would
from fans rushing the field. But
well, I'll tell you, because I came up from New Prague, he said, "Where do you want to work?" And he said, "How'd you like to work the field?" That's how it started.
Yeah.
I said, "I'd love it." He said, "Here's your job," and he told me all the things that. What he didn't know is I was going to end up being a hot dog usher. Like Bud Grant said, put some mustard on that hot dog. I'll never forget that. The only fun thing he ever said to me, to be honest. He didn't like what I did.
Who did? Bud? Because
he
too theatrical?
He didn't like that stuff. You know?
Oh, well, and from anyone around him, his players?
Oh.
No, it's all business. It was all business with Bud.
Remember Ursul McBee? He got fired because he wore that pantsuit or whatever.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, his wife was actually a teacher of mine in high school.
Oh,
Ursul
really?
McBee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Edina?
No, it's St. Louis Park.
Oh, St. Louis Park. That's right.
Yeah. So that's crazy. So how long did you end up staying at Met Stadium and working?
Well, I went from 62 to 78. 17 years. It's amazing because Mick Tingelhoff played from 62 to 78.
My goodness.
And I used to say, hey, I lasted just as long as you did, Mick. What do you think? He got such a kick out of that.
Well, I try to tell people, and I've been blessed to, I'm of that age where I grew up, as a young reporter covering them and being in awe of the Purple People Eaters and Fran and the rest of the gang, and especially Bud, who I was mortally afraid to have a word with because he'd just look at you and you'd kind of start crying, but ended up being, just great friends with all of them. But you must have had some of your favorites that stood out over time because it was much different. I mean, it's like a family atmosphere. I mean, those guys, there was no free agency, so you knew the players would be coming back year after year after year. And people, they not only built up relationships with each other, but with the fans. They'd tailgate with the fans where tailgating was invented outside of Met Stadium.
Very true. That's why you mentioned that. That was the same day, of course, that Fran Tarkenton's dad died. I watch it on TV.
I remember hearing about Fran's dad after the Vikings had that crushing loss. His dad, who's, by the way, I remember his first name was Dallas.
Yes, it was.
Dallas Tarkenton, they announced later in the day, died of a heart attack or something that afternoon. So you talk about the ultimate worst day of someone's life. That may have been it for Francis. And
he found out on television.
Are you kidding?
He was in the parking lot after the game with, like you said, tailgating like they always do. And that came over, the emergency, whatever. And
they didn't have cell phones back then. And
I guess he just went nuts. So I don't blame him.
I don't either.
But there are other things that happened. I'm sure there are a lot of other things, but I know one thing. You could hear a pin drop after that Pearson touchdown.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, well, it was something else. But I assume you had, you mentioned Bud didn't like your theatrics, but what did you think of him as a man, as a coach? And you followed him, I'm sure, when he was here back in even his playing days at some point.
I do remember visiting with him a few times, and he always told me, he said, I don't like what you do, but Jim Finks does. So you keep
Jim
doing
Finks
it.
was the general manager for the Vikings for many years.
Great guy.
Yeah, he was. That was quite a duo they had there.
But I had fun, and Finks thought it was great because he said, people love to watch you.
Yeah.
He said, they cheer for you. I think the highlight of my life, though, out there, we had these miniature footballs that we throw to the crowd, and I threw it up to the third deck. I actually threw it to the third deck.
It's quite an arm.
People cheered. They stood up and clapped like I had won the World Series.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did have a pretty good arm in those days, so I felt good about that. But there's so many things I got to do because of the ushering. I got to know a lot of the guys in the NFL that would come in every year. One of the nicest guys was Earl Morrall.
Quarterback for Baltimore.
Where's Jonckowski?
Really?
Yeah. And my favorite was Chris Handberger for the Washington Redskins. But I got to know all these guys.
Yeah.
And it was really a thrill. And Bob Sims gave me all the. Well, when I worked baseball, I had the umpire's tunnel. All I did was open the gate when they went out, open the gate when they came back. That's all I had to do.
So you worked Twins games as well?
Yeah, as many as I could, yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy. And how many years did you end up doing that?
Well, the Vikings 17, the Twins only about 5.
78, yeah.
Because I had to leave to be in radio in Ladysmith, Wisconsin.
Wait a minute.
So I left.
Ladysmith, Wisconsin?
That's where I started.
Wow.
1964.
My goodness. Did you have a talk show?
I worked from 6 a.m. to noon. I had everything. I did the sports. I did the weather. I emptied the baskets.
Right.
Farm news.
I was going to say.
Oh, I'll tell you.
Well, you've done a little bit of everything, and I want to talk more about that. I want to talk about, working with the Gophers, some of your favorite players, some of your favorite memories, your Toastmastering. I don't know how many events you've emceed over the years. I can't even imagine some of your favorite players that you've been around. So we're going to take a quick break and hear from our wonderful sponsors, Lexus of Wayzata, Lexus of Maplewood, thanks to Charlie Swanson, and my friends at Stretch Lab as well. So we'll hear from them and come right back and continue our conversation with the one and only Dick Jonckowski. Yes, it is Lexus December to Remember time. It's here. It is the very best time of year to purchase a new Lexus, and it's not even close. And keep in mind, it doesn't matter which side of the town you're on, because they have locations in Wayzata and Maplewood. Too many incentives to even list right now. So there's a reason why they call it a December to Remember. It's a great time to go see Charlie Swanson or his great staff. December to Remember ends, you guessed it, at the end of December. So see the inventory at Lexus of Wayzata or lexusofmaplewood.com. Hey, Rosa here for Stretch Labs in the Twin City area. I've been talking about them for months now, and for good reason. I haven't felt this good in years. It's a great add-on to your fitness routine. Stretch practitioners know how to heal what ails you. I mean, they will work on your neck, your shoulders, your hamstrings, your back. I mean, that's what's been bugging me the most. And I felt so much better after the last 3 sessions I've had than I have in months and months and months. And right now they have an introductory 50-minute stretch plus assessment discounted to only $50. It would make a great gift for the holidays. So check out Stretch Lab at locations throughout the Twin Cities. Book any of their stretch practitioners. They're all terrific at what they do. And tell them Rosie sent you. Welcome back to our conversation with Dick Jonckowski. We're living the days of based on the 50-year anniversary of the Hail Mary, one of the most painful days in Viking history. And, of course, they had to show it on national television last night. But the Vikings got the last laugh because they beat the Cowboys and knocked them out of the playoffs, right? That's never going to end. Dick, I know we're going to segue a little bit from your days with the Minnesota Vikings and your ushering with them. And I think about your association with the Minnesota Gophers. And in all aspects, I think of your public address announcing and just being close to some of the coaches. I want to get your opinions about some of the people you worked with. But how long did you have that particular job with the Gophers? I remember the great Julie Perlt was the announcer, the PA announcer for football, and I grew up going to Memorial Stadium, and Julie had this one habit of, again, we didn't have any communication other than we're watching the game, and Julie would say, at the half, Ohio State 10, Michigan 20. He'd give the losing score first just to tease people.
He did.
And he was quite a character. But when did you get involved with Gopher sports?
Well, actually, I was a Boy Scout usher way back with football and basketball. when that would have been like 59, 60, 61, when they went to the Rose Bowl 2 years.
Wow, that's my first year I went to Gopher games. It was 1960. Sandy Stevens in that group, Bobby Bell.
My favorite player was Tom Hall. Do you remember him?
I remember the name.
I sure liked him.
Yeah.
But my dad's cousin was the head of the Boy Scout ushers.
Okay.
So when I said Dick Jonckowski, hey, you know George? I said, it's my dad. Where do you want to work? Just that quick. I said, where could I? He said, how about the Gopher bench? I said, I'll take it.
No kidding.
So I worked every game at the Gopher bench and just had to make sure nobody bothered the Gophers during the game. I had some nice stuff out of that deal.
Yeah, I just, I know that we thankfully have a stadium on campus again after being at the Metrodome for so many years. But my memories with my dad would park blocks and blocks away, and we'd walk down University Avenue, and the frat houses and the band would come marching down. And I remember the Boy Scouts, if I'm not wrong about this, would have like a big board with all these souvenirs on them to sell to people. I had a buddy of mine that would do that because we'd walk around 3/4 of the stadium because our seats were over there, and then you'd walk up that tunnel. I mean, and it was, my dad would bring his old Army blanket, and we'd sit out there and watch those games. And that's the first, I remember, I tell people this story. The first year I went was, I think, 1960. So I was 8 years old, and the Gophers had a phenomenal football team. They brought up, they were one of the few coaches. Murray Warmath was one of the few coaches that brought black players up from the South because Carl Eller, Bobby Bell was, Sandy Stevens, Bill Muncie, and they ended up going to the Rose Bowl that year. I remember turning to my dad and going, "Hey, Dad, do they go to the Rose Bowl every year?" They haven't been back since.
That's right. Yeah, they lost to Washington, and they beat
UCLA the following year.
But I love it. I had such a nice setup.
Great time there. Huh?
Just great. And I got to know those guys a lot, too. Same deal.
Right.
Nice guys. They'd always take time out for you. And Murray Warmath, who wasn't there then. Yes, he was. Excuse me.
Yeah,
Murray
was
and
there.
I got to be good friends. Mm-hmm. And then Bob McNamara was one of his favorites of all time.
Oh, okay.
So I worked a lot of banquets for Bob McNamara, and a lot of times it was a Murray Warmath birthday party.
Yeah, that's really something. Murray ended up being, was a longtime Gopher coach. He had his ups and downs with the University of Minnesota. They hung him in effigy one time, right? Fans did that. Think about, fan behavior today. Can you imagine? Didn't they do that? I thought they did.
I saw the
whatever.
The dummy that they had hanging is supposed to be him.
Goodness
gracious. Well, we see that every day. I'm afraid to go to Culver's, for Christ's sake, wondering who's going to be there.
Yeah.
It's not like, as you know, it's just amazing how careful you have to be.
Yeah, it's true. So when did you get into, Julie was there for a long time. When did you get into being a public address, and how did you segue into that? You were doing radio, as you mentioned, Lady Smith.
At that time, I was not. I was. Then I had not radio till a little bit later on. But Paul Gill really took me under his wing, so to speak. So what I did,
former athletic director, and great athlete.
I went to Brown Institute for radio broadcasting.
Okay,
graduated there at 64, and then I shortly after that, well, it was actually longer than now that I think about it, but I was doing all kinds of different stuff, emceeing banquets, even a Queen contest in Lady Smith, Wisconsin, the Polish contest, nobody won it. But
here we go with the one-liners.
No, it's just amazing.
Nobody won it.
And the jokes were great. People like the one-liners, and so I've been a living, so to speak. I've been doing it for, 64. Over 50 years for sure, maybe even longer than that.
Would you tell me you're 82 right now?
Yeah, I'm still doing some of it.
Yeah.
Nursing homes and senior care centers.
Nothing wrong with that.
I like it though.
Yeah.
Well, you love this. I did one in Northfield, the Three Leagues Care Center. Walked in a lady in a wheelchair. I said, "Do you know who I am?" No, but if you go to the front desk, I think they can tell you. That was one of the best comebacks I've ever had.
They think they can.
That's true. So you never know what's going to happen. I had a lady raise her hand. Do you have any naughty stories? Do you have any naughty stories? I said, I might, but I'm not going to use them here. It's just amazing how they laugh. They love to laugh. One guy cried because I talked about the Philadelphia Eagles, and he was in this nursing home, and he started to cry, and he waved his hand like this to me. I said, "Yes, sir. I'm from Philadelphia. I love Philadelphia." Oh, and the nurse said, "He never talks. You hit a note there, something that He loved it.
No kidding.
He remembered Van Rockland and Chuck Bednarik.
It all came back to him.
Yeah, it all came back to him.
It's amazing how that.
So
how
I
that
was
works.
proud of myself that I did that. But you never know what they're thinking, because they don't have a whole lot to look forward to.
Right, right.
So I enjoy the people that say your jokes. I love those one-liners.
Yeah,
You
you've
know?
got a million of them. But getting back to your days at the Gophers, I remember sitting across, Williams Arena. You'd sit below court level because the raised court, and I had my press seat not too far from Sid Hartman. And if Sid wasn't yelling at the officials, he was yelling at anyone in particular. But he'd know the officials by name, and they'd yell back at him. But you were doing that for how many years? You had a lot of fun doing that.
31 years basketball.
Wow.
30 years of baseball.
Yeah.
And 10 years of football at the Metrodome. I started when Lou Holtz was our coach.
Man.
Yeah, so I was lucky. Well, if Paul Gill wouldn't have been such a nice person to give me a chance.
Right.
Clem Haskins' first year here, Julie decided to retire because he didn't want to drive at night or could not drive at night. And he was in basketball for, 54 years and football for 60.
Unbelievable.
But he and I became friends. And all I did was imitate him when I was a Boy Scout. Yeah. I loved his line about they're playing Indiana and there was a timeout called and the band started up. Well, the band plays Shut Up. If I would say that, I would have been fired so fast, it's unbelievable.
Well, the band, please shut up. Julie.
Yeah. He got by there. There was nobody to actually direct him. He didn't have to answer anybody. I had to answer about 19 people when I was there. But yeah, I was lucky to be there that long and had so many people that enjoyed my style. I even get it now when I go to a game. We miss your style.
Well, that's part of it. I mean, you can't, listen, not taking anything away from people who do what you did as a public address guy for many, many years. But you can add some pizzazz and your personality, as you did, Dick, for so many years. Fans gravitate to that as much as going to watch the players that they're cheering for. It makes a difference, and that's a style of your own that you perfected for all those years.
Yeah, that's really true. And I remember I used to try to see what I could do. I remember we had a guy named Clark, and then we had not Quincy Lewis at the time, Cannell Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
Not Clark, I can't remember his first name. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, here's my chance. Lewis and Clark in for Minnesota. And somebody got mad in the front office.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, they did. Don't do that. We don't believe in that.
Oh, jeez.
But I tried to, anytime I could, I'd throw something in there that would work.
But we experienced, and I say we because we were both, covering many of those teams. I always hearken, I tell people, I hope they can get it back, but I don't know if it's ever going to happen. The atmosphere at Williams Arena on a cold winter night, Big Ten game, maybe Bob Knight would roll into town or Johnny Orr or one of those guys, and Jim Dutcher was coaching, and then eventually went down the line. And that's why I first got my start in doing a basketball show with Jim Dutcher. But are there players that stood out to you, the Kevin McHale's, the Flip Saunders, the people that you got to be around a lot that were just bigger than life personalities on the Gophers during that time?
Before I started announcing, Lou Hudson was always my favorite all-time Gopher.
Really?
Yeah. And I look back at that team with Ron B. Hagan, Jim Brewer, and those guys. That's one of my favorite teams ever.
Yeah.
Also, the 64 team with Lou Hudson, Archie Clark, Don Yates, Terry Quincy.
You remember them all.
Oh, they were just great ball players and great fun to do.
Well, Lou Hudson went on to become a really good pro, and I remember he broke his arm, right?
Navicular.
On his right hand. So he ended up shooting left-handed.
Yes.
He stayed the games and shot left-handed. Can you imagine that today? Those guys would be out for weeks with the contracts they have.
He averaged 19 points a game left-handed.
How about
Can you believe that?
Yeah, and he was right-handed. Never batted an eye.
When I think about it. How about, I just love the Gopher situation. Never thinking I'd be an announcer, but it sure worked out well for me, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the opportunity, really, just to be around Clem Haskins when it first started.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was Haskins, but my favorite coach to work for, Tubby Smith.
Really?
Oh, he was great. I had a deal with Tubby. I would tell a joke just before the game started. I told him I was dating a homeless woman. He said, really, how's it going? I said, it's great. You can drop her off anywhere. And she just rolled. He just rolled. You wouldn't believe it. He just went crazy. He was fun to be with, really.
Yeah. So you did that for how long? The Gopher basketball.
31 years.
My God.
Yeah, 31.
And I know you've continued. Every time I've run into you, you're still, as you mentioned, and it keeps you young and it keeps you healthy. We want to talk about that as well. But being a Toastmaster, an MC, can you even estimate how many events you've done over the years? I mean, it's just staggering how popular Dick Jonckowski is as a guy to have MC your program and with the one-liners you have and the way you approach it.
I know at least 1,500 for sure, and maybe more than that. I still do the Hockey Old Timers Luncheon at Mancini's, and there are certain things that I've done for 40 years. The Amateur Baseball Hall of Fame dinner in St. Cloud.
Right.
Just amazing. They still ask me back, even though I'm 82 years old.
Do you as they say in the comedy world, do you have to freshen up your material, or do you kind of just always go by the standbys?
Well, it depends. Yeah, if it's something new. Just like with McCarthy now when he had all this problem, I said, McCarthy could overthrow President Trump. Stuff like that. Or the one I like, the guys walking down the street in Minneapolis, they look in the car window, there was 2 tickets from the Vikings game laying on the van, the dash. So the guy breaks the window and gives them 2 more.
Yeah.
Just funny stuff, but now I can't use it. Because they're playing a lot better.
Now they're playing better. Yeah, that is good. Thankfully.
Yeah.
You've also had, and I know you've battled through it. And I hope you don't mind talking a little bit about because it's an inspiration to people. You've battled through some pretty serious health issues. You're of that age. I'm not that far behind you, and you always worry about that every day. You get up, how am I feeling? What's going on? But could you speak to some of the things you've gone through? Because here you are. And you're mentally as sharp as I've ever known you with the jokes and the one-liners and the memories of all the players that you've been around all these years.
Well, I've been very fortunate. I've had cancer 3 times now. It's been a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I just went 2 weeks ago to my oncologist, and she said, everything looks good. You don't have to come back for a year.
Oh, that's great.
So I've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
But even with the cancer, I've been able to do a lot of things. I got cancer in 2014, and the next week, I was diagnosed with diabetes. So I really went through a lot of it for a while. I was in the hospital for a while, and then I had COVID. I was in the hospital for a month with COVID. I've had a lot of problems that way, but I keep trying to laugh and keep people happy.
Well, I was going to say, I think maybe you could speak to this as well, as far as people giving people advice about how much attitude, having a positive attitude beyond medicine that we all are capable of potentially getting matters as you continue on with your life's journey.
Well, I think it means a lot to show the people, even in their 90s, how happy I am at 82, or anybody that has cancer. I know a lot of people that have had it, and they're probably a lot worse than I did as far as cancer is concerned. But I tell them, I'll pray for you. Here's what I did. I try to have a good outlook. I love sports so much, and I have a sports museum that you've seen. In fact, you did a story on it on CCO, I remember. Great job.
Well, I appreciate that. It is, and when you say you have a sports museum, it was in your basement, right? I mean, and you.
Yes.
What was some of your prized possession? Was that? I mean, because a lot of people have baseball card collection, whatever it might be. Yours is a little more unique.
Mine is not really cards. I've got a lot of cards, but my main thing is guys like my favorite baseball player, Stan Musial and Richie Ashburn, were my 2 heroes. Mm-hmm. In hockey, it was Gordie Howe and Alex Delvecchio. In basketball, probably George Mikan, even though I was just a kid. Bob Cousy, also Pete Maravich. I loved watching him. And then in hockey, football, as I told you off the air, my 3 favorites as a kid, Otto Graham, Bobby Lane, and Norm Van Brocklin.
Oh, my.
So it goes back a ways.
Yeah.
Then, of course, wrestling, my hero, Hulk Hogan was.
Right.
I loved Hulk Hogan. My son just admired him more than I did. But I look back at Yukon Eric. Do you remember that name?
I do.
And Hercules Cortez.
Man.
And I was a ring announcer.
I was a Vern Gagne guy, so
Yeah, I was a Vern. I worked for Vern for about 6 years, 83 to 89.
What?
I did. I was a ring announcer for
what
wrestling.
Haven't you done?
And I was a softball announcer for Minnesota Norsemen.
Oh, my.
I've done just about anything you think of.
Yeah.
I worked for the Pipers and the Muskies.
Let's tell people what those were, because people weren't born. They were American Basketball Association. The NBA had a counterpart, much like the AFL, NFL for a while, but the ABA, and they had some really talented players, the Connie Hawkinses of the world. So the ABA was they'd play here, at the auditorium? Where they play there?
Met Center.
Met Center.
Beautiful, beautiful setup.
Yeah.
We had our best player with the Muskies was Mel Daniels.
Sure.
But we had a few. Chico Vaughn was with the best one was Hawkins, you mentioned. But I liked Art Heyman. He's a little crazy, but a great player those years.
So you did that as well?
Yeah, I did those for 2 years. Well, Dick Enroth started doing the Muskies, and I ended up doing and then I did the Pipers for the whole year. Also, I was assistant PR director for the Pipers. And I remember we couldn't get a crowd. Lady called in. I answered the phone. She said, "What time does the game start?" I said, "What time can you get here?" It was unbelievable. We had to do this. We also thought about taking all the seats out of the Met Center and advertising standing room only, but nothing worked.
That's funny.
Nothing worked.
No, nothing did work. But, you remember, and it's a good history lesson because because of your experience, I use that word because I remember my dad taking me to a Minneapolis Laker game, and I think it was at the Armory.
Yep.
And they were playing the Celtics in the playoffs, and they got eliminated in 5 games, whatever. And I have these vague memories of seeing Bob Cousy and Elgin Baylor playing for the Lakers. And the next year, they went to Los Angeles. And my dad was telling me, he says, well, Bob Short's the owner, and, the players, if the players didn't know where the game was, the fans certainly weren't going to know. They played at the auditorium, the Armory. They didn't have a home.
No.
And the Lakers could not get a deal done here in Minneapolis. They moved to Los Angeles. The next year, they drafted a guy named Jerry West, and as they say, the rest is history. But do you remember all that?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. I remember Baylor's first year, he went to St. Paul Auditorium, and the game was at the Minneapolis Armory. He didn't get there till halftime. So
are you kidding?
No, this is true. So if the players didn't know where it was, how did they expect the fans to come to the game? I really thought that.
And just think how close to potentially, of course, Bob Short had other ideas. And he owned a hotel downtown Minneapolis called the Leamington.
Yeah.
But Bob Short was a businessman. And, it's like anything else. Eventually, last time I looked, they don't have any lakes in Los Angeles. And they took our name. They took our championships. They took our everything with them. And off they went. And then they won. They ran off all those championships. That's our damn team.
Yeah, you're right.
That was the George Mikan statue. And
there's another thing, Mark. I can't believe they waited till 2001 to erect that statue.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, one of my great thrills was that they had a Minneapolis Laker reunion.
Oh yeah,
and I took my dear mom, my mom would go to the Laker games, and she would tell me she would be sitting a couple rows off the court, whatever, and she'd be yelling at the officials, get your hands off of Mikan. Take your hands off. And she got to meet George. He was in a wheelchair at that time, and he still had that broad smile on his face.
He did.
And I don't think my mom has ever smiled. I have a picture that I will treasure for the rest of my days of my mom with her arm around George Mikan in his wheelchair and understanding what he meant to her as a fan growing up and coming back to Minneapolis with her husband to watch them play basketball.
George had a great sense of humor. A lady asked him why he was drafted from DePaul. Why did the Lakers draft him? He said, because I could open up paid toilets. He was 6'10". He'd reach, this is true, because they were my boss and my trade. That's it.
That was it.
He'd reach over, unlock it, and 20 guys would use it, never pay a nickel.
That's so funny.
That and the second
paid toilets.
That's right. And when they were real plentiful.
Yeah.
There's still some once in a while.
Once in a while.
He also was talked about other ways with shooting free throws. Sid Borgia was one of the legendary referees, and George shot underhand free throws, and he always made the sign of the cross. And Sid Borgia said, "George, tell me something. When you make the sign of the cross, does that help you make free throws?" He said, "Not if you can't shoot them." The best one, I think, a lady interviewed him a few years before he died in Arizona. Living in Arizona, she was doing it for ESPN, I think. But she talked to George. She said, "George, how would you do in today's NBA?" He said, "I don't think I can score a basket." She said, "What? You're one of the greatest players ever, the player of the first half century.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you say that?" He said, "I'm 80 years old." and all the great stuff but people don't know that part about it. And another thing he always told me, because I worked right across the hall from the ABA office, the Farmers and Mechanics building, he said, "Dick, when I walk down the street, invariable, I'm honored because people ask for my autograph. I've never turned anybody down."
No kidding.
He said, "I've never turned anybody down." I thought that was pretty good.
Well, I used to hear the story like when the Minneapolis Lakers would go to Madison Square Garden to play the Knicks. It would the marquee outside Madison Square Garden would say George Mikan versus the Knicks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it would not be the Minneapolis Lakers.
Right.
That's how great this man was for so many years, and what a class act. I feel so privileged that I got to meet him and say hello to him in my adult years when I was working at Channel 4.
One of those games I remember, a true story. It said George Mikan against the Knicks. So they're in the locker room and nobody's getting dressed. George says, "Hey guys, we got to go out and shoot. We got to shoot layups." And they weren't dressing. Finally, Slater went and said, "George, I see your name on the marquee. Go out and play them." Good line,
Unbelievable.
but true.
That's so true. So you're just going to keep going, my friend, right? You feel good?
Well, I enjoy talking to the as I mentioned, to the senior citizens. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Anytime I can get any job, I've spoken to just about any place you can think of. Bowling banquets, even the Shakopee Women's Reformatory.
What?
I did a show in the isolation ward several years ago. I was scared to death. But I did
drop
okay.
some one-liners in there.
Well, I did. You know how I started? I didn't know how I could make them laugh. Well, I said it's great to have a captive audience. And they laughed. And I had them the rest of the time.
That's so good. Well, Dick, you are one of a kind, a man of million stories, and I appreciate that our good friend Pat Royce kind of hooked us up again, and I know we stay in touch, and I can't thank you enough for being part of the Rosen Sports Monday podcast today and sharing some of those great stories, starting with the 50. Unbelievable. It's been 50 years of the Hail Mary. And because of that pass, that's how the term Hail Mary came to be.
That's right. I remember when you had me on your sports, Rosen Sports Sunday,
right?
When I brought my memorabilia in, and it was a great 10 minutes, whatever we had. I had more people stop me after that, saying that was great.
I loved it.
So
you're going to hang on to all that stuff as long as you can.
Well, my family and my wife especially would like to see me sell a lot of it so they wouldn't have to bother with it.
Sure,
Jeff knows all about it, but my wife and my daughter don't really care. I don't think so.
Sure,
it'll still be sold. Some I'm sure, but
some of it.
Whether I'll get what I should get, I never know. I might not do it.
Well, stay well, my friend. It's an honor to have you in here today and to talk about old times and good times and stay healthy. Good to see you.
I always on all my speeches I usually like to tell people it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. Yeah. And I think that I've always lived by that, and I think it really has paid off. So. God keeps me here for something like a lady told me after she found out I was cancer-free for the third time. She said, "You know why you didn't die?" I said, "Why?" She said, "Apparently God doesn't need you and the devil doesn't want you." How's that, Marky?
That's a great way to end this. That's a great line.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. You've been a great friend.
Thanks, Dick.